it's pretty straightforward, you know.
Even
You
if
got to
it's
get them in on time.
even if it's straightforward, here's the trick about it. If you keep changing, if you keep changing the system, that means that there's going to be hiccups. Because I know when we did a period, we had some major hiccups with that because I was one of the guinea pigs in that. So our CD part of it, when we would send the reports out to you guys, it was incorrect. It couldn't be correct because when they populated it in the system, what happened is there was no interest on it. So you had to go back 2 or 3 days, yes, and calculate that manually to put that in. So
Yeah, but
it's
that
like,
doesn't that reflect poorly on Commonwealth Bank?
yes,
The central bank says these are the guidelines. Okay, you've been a licensee, you've been working, and so forth. You decide to change your system. The central bank says no problem. You still have to meet this deadline.
Hello.
Hi, Carla.
Hi.
Hi, Carla. So is this
Hi.
affecting Carla's work as well?
uh-uh.
Hi.
Hello, Carla. How are you? You're looking cheerful today. Very nice.
I'm rested, honey. Look at you with that big dimple. How are
You're
you?
rested. You had a vacation?
No, I was working hard. I was under plenty pressure.
Very nice.
Very nice, eh? I like them too.
To be the guinea pigs this go round with the new
Software.
no,
Okay.
so yeah. So she can be the guinea pig. So we're gonna see how this go.
Wow, that's unfortunate because the central bank is pretty harsh about those things, about
Yeah.
reporting on time, and they need to be. They need to be. They should not accept. They should not accept any kind of excuses. You are a large bank, right?
Paulette, you left your charger with Miss Thingamina.
Yeah, I didn't remember until I got home. I'll get it in the morning. But here's the thing, central bank is also, let me put this nicely.
I don't work for the central bank.
Huh?
I don't work for the central bank, so you don't need to be nice.
Okay, so central bank is also retarded because you can bring out something, for instance, you say that the NGOs have to have all these documentations and they have to have license and then it has to be done in this manner. This is all during COVID. There's no offices open, but you're telling the banks that you're going to fine them if these things are not up to date. Now you have the banks closing people's accounts out because they cannot get these certificates. So now they got to start all over. So they are also.
So let me ask. So let me play devil's advocate for a moment to you and Carla. Okay. How many times do you think the central bank came to Commonwealth Bank and said, "You have to get this information up to date"?
A lot of times. No.
In reference to the NGOs, because I am an NGO member, they just came up with that the same past year. Yeah. No, they included like so fraternities, sororities, and youth groups. They literally just included us in that.
It's almost 2 years because
it's going on 2 years now. Everybody is in a queue. No, everybody is in a queue. Everyone did their stuff. We got our receipts and everything from the government to say it's in. They're waiting for someone to print it or whatever. Checks were cut for them, but the government didn't do anything. So central bank was kept saying to the banks, "Oh no, you're gonna have to close these accounts. You give them 30 days, then you come back. Okay, give them 30 more days, then 4 days." Then they came back a couple months ago, about a couple of weeks ago, and say, "Okay, so those NGOs don't need it anymore. But you have now already closed out so many of the people's account that they have to now start all over again." So they are oxymorons too. And you giving people extra work.
Well, I went to open an account with a friend of mine at one of the banks, and I'm just amazed at the amount of stuff that the bank wants. But the bank says this is information that has to be passed, has to be on their files as per the central
Yes. Yes.
legislation in this country. They don't make that stuff up.
No.
Yeah. The
Well,
difficulty we have is that the difficulty that we have always had is that this country has never been, businesses in this country have never been very good at documentation, because in a certain sense it wasn't necessary because we had no income tax. But now, right, if you want to supply goods to the government in any way, shape, or form, right, they tell you have to become a vendor, a registered vendor. Doesn't mean you're going to get the job or anything. And to do that, you have to meet the following requirements. You have to have all of your VAT paid up. You have to have your business license paid up to date. You have to have your employees' NIB stuff paid up to date. If not, they won't do business with you. And they're doing that across the board. Now look at how long people have been fighting to get their NIB contributions paid by their employers, right?
Mhm.
Remember that guy, Wendell Jones,
Yeah. They wasn't paying the people, Wendell Jones and wasn't paying the NIB for the staff.
right, exactly. Now some of those people retired or quit and they have no money, right? The government threatened to put Wendell Jones in jail and so on and like that. The case going to court, he lose. Right? So what's happening is we're just coming into in a certain way the new order of things that's already the standard order of things in other parts of the world. I hate to say that,
It's not really
but
the
it's
new
true.
order.
It's the new
It's not
order
the
for
new
us.
order. Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's the new order for us. I mean, I tried to pay my BTC bill by check, and they tell me no, they will not accept a check. I was like, what? What do you mean you won't accept a check? No, they'll take cash, but they won't take a check.
Or a
Okay?
debit
And
card.
they'll take plastic, debit card, credit card, or cash. And think about that. That means that the whole question of bounce checks have gone away from that, right? Just gone away. And most people use their debit card or their credit card. Yeah. And BTC did it. PPL has done it. Water and Sewage has done it, but they only do it. Most of them will do it for personal, but corporate accounts, they still allow you to write a check, but that's going to go away too. I say all of that just to say the difficulty that unfortunately the Commonwealth Bank has experienced is across the board. All the major financial institutions are having similar issues, and one of them is management just isn't doing their job very well. You know, running a bank is a lot more than just being able to lend money, as you're seeing from this course, right, Carla? Right, Dominic? Yeah. And if the legislation and the compliance environment changes, you got to stay up to date, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not. Okay. And you can't go and talk your way around it like we used to be able to do. I mean, they give you a little bit of leeway, they give you a little bit of leeway. And a lot of that, OUW2ZZ, who's that?
That's the password to get in the class.
That's me. I'm going to change it right now.
Oh, secret password. Okay. And one of the things that's happening, has been happening for the past probably 10 years, going on that long, is the banks are having to accept that the quality of the management that they have may not be as good as they may think, the board of directors. Okay, because it's changing quickly. I mean, how you think of when you first joined the bank, Colette and Carla, how different it was to now. And I'm assuming you've both been in the bank over 15 years, or been in banking over 15 years.
Yeah.
Carla?
Yes.
Okay, big change. big change, right? And everything revolves around that computer system now. Yeah, and everything is getting to the point where first they started automating things in operations. Then they automated things in the loan side for the drawdown on the loans, and now they're automating reports. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, geez, when I was working for Lloyd's Bank, most of our reports were automated. Most of the major reports were automated. The bank was too big to be doing them and adjusting them by hand. What could I say? So anyway, let's not get depressed about that. All right. Everything is going well with you, Dominic, Carla, Colette.
Yeah,
Colette,
yes,
that's a beautiful backdrop. Is that your kitchen?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
that's a picture.
That's a kitchen.
Yeah, but that's a picture.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Miss Cartwright, do you think you and Miss Fernanda, y'all think y'all could put your video on? Let me make sure it's y'all. You don't look.
I was moving around. That's
Oh,
why
that's
I'm getting
bright.
accelerated.
Oh, that's really nice, Angelique. You have the sun right on the screen. It's rough. Anybody know a Mercedes Johnson?
Yeah, that's my team.
Mercedes Johnson is Martine.
Yeah, that's a daughter thing.
Oh, that's a daughter's email. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I get this email and I couldn't figure out who this thing was from.
I think that's what. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so everybody's going along. Projects are going along. How many more weeks we got left, Colette?
Oh,
4 weeks to not to the final exam, to the final class.
well, 5.
Well, today's the 23rd. On the 30th,
Yeah.
we have a class because that's not a holiday. The right? The 5th is a holiday, right? But the 6th is not.
It's a holiday. It's a
Is
holiday.
Easter is
Monday, yeah.
the 2nd of. Hold on, let me get this right. When is Easter? When is Good Friday? The 9th or the
The
2nd?
9th.
The 9th. So.
No, Good
the
Friday is the
second.
second.
The
Yeah,
second.
the second.
All right. Which one of y'all is go to the Anglican church? Then y'all gonna know. The rest of y'all ain't sure.
Me is the second.
Thank you,
It's the
Thank you,
second.
Angelique. Okay. So that's right. Good Friday is the 2nd. And so the following Monday is a holiday as well, is it not?
Yep.
That's Easter Monday. Easter. Okay.
And,
So the 6th we have a class, and then the 12th, and then on the 19th we have the final exam. Isn't that correct? I may be wrong.
no, if you say so.
No, it ain't what I say. I'm asking. I know I put
Yeah.
it out there.
Yes, you did.
And we're on test
6,
number
you said
4.
You said the 6th we have a class. Which other day?
The 13th should be the 13th and the 20th. The 13th should be your last class, I think.
The 13th say, oh no. Yeah, the 13th is the last class. The final exam is on the 20th.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelique. So we're doing our 4th test today. We got 2 more tests to go, right? Unless you all want me to make the final even more difficult. So that means that we got to have a test next week on the 30th. That'll be test number 5. And then we got to have a test on the 6th if we're going to try and finish.
So if we don't
So
do
I
it
could drop.
today, we could do one on the 30th and one on the 6th.
No. We need, there are 3 tests that need to be done. Test 4 is going to be done today. We put
Okay.
it off from last week, so that's going to be done today. Right? That's the 23rd. And then on the 30th, we're going to have another test. Okay? So that'll be test number 5. Right? And then on the 6th, you have to have another test. That'll be test number 6. So every week, you're going to have a test from now on to try and get past the 6th so that y'all could get some good marks so that Martine and Shawnette won't say that I'm trying to fail her. Hi, Shawnette. Hi, Ms. Whitfield. Miss Ferguson is in. Miss Whitfield. Okay, so did you guys all hear that? Let me say it again. We're going to work from today, the 23rd of March. We have a test number 4 today. Then on the 30th of March, we're going to have a test, which will be test number 5, right? And then on the 6th of April, we will have test number 6. The last class is the 13th, right? And I think that's when the last day I'll accept your papers. And on the 20th, we have an exam, final exam, and we're done.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Martine, or should I say Mercedes?
Oh, Lord.
Okay. So every week we having a test because we got to get caught up. But it's not too difficult. The easiest tests are these in-class tests. The final is much harder, usually. Well, it's because it's longer.
What's gonna
Okay.
be on the final, Mr. Fontaine?
Oh, what would you like for me to put on the final? Anything in particular?
Or multiple choice?
Multiple choice. Okay.
Mhm.
Multiple choice takes a lot of work from me to make, but it doesn't take much to do. All right. But multiple choice is harder for you, by the way. But we might be able to do that just for you, Carla. All right. I think we got everybody here. Yeah. So we're going to start. We have a test. It's going to start at 8 o'clock or 5 minutes to 8. So Colette, if you could make sure and inform me when it's like 10 to 8. So I can
Okay.
get the email to y'all so we can get going. All right.
Yes, sir.
That's
Okay.
the test
right.
on last week lesson.
No, this is the test that y'all kept putting off. Remember? This is on bonds.
Oh, bonds,
Stuff
okay.
on. Okay. Okay. So we are now talking about bank regulations. The class last week where we started bank regulations, and before that we had done commercial bank operations. Now we're doing bank regulations, and we talked about the underlying premise for bank regulations. Okay, and this is from the regulator's point of view, right? That you're trying to protect the customers of the bank, in particular the depositors who have entrusted their money to the bank. We've also talked about, about the Basel I, Basel II, and Basel III Accords. We didn't finish Basel III. And in Basel I and II, specifically the banks were asked to do a particular set of, I don't want to say regulations, but they were basically said they had to meet the standards set by Basel I and then meet the standards set by Basel II.
Child,
And
I got
Basel,
some new skincare products. I gotta fill you in on them. I mean, I didn't even do no research. I just.
Hello?
Ms. Whitfield, is the skincare products for us?
Sorry about that, Mr. Fountain. Basel I and Basel II. I was listening. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we were listening too. Interesting. I hope they're good skincare products. All right. Okay, so we're going to start to share the screen. So just hold on a second, please. Okay, so we're going to just go over the Basel III and continue on from there. Now, the Basel, all the Basel Accords and standards were agreed amongst the central banks, the various central banks that are part and parcel of the accord. And they agreed that basically the banks that are under their supervisions, right, have to meet these standards, okay? And they provided guidelines as to how this is to be done. In the Bahamas, right, that was a very painful exercise because the banks here, right, had never had such strenuous framework put out by the Central Bank of the Bahamas. So it marked a very big change in how the central bank, right, dealt with the commercial banks in the Bahamas. Okay, they were much more passive before, and they're not like that anymore. The Basel II framework is what Basel II framework is what the central bank has all its licensees under now. And they are moving towards certain aspects of the Basel III framework. Okay. Now, the Basel III framework offers recommendation that bank regulators can adapt to increase the strength or the resilience of their banking system. Okay. Now, what they're trying to do is make it such that it is more difficult for the failure of one bank to have such a domino effect and impact all the other banks in the country to a degree where your financial system collapses, if only for a day. So that's one of the reasons, that's the underlying sort of pitch to try and keep the banking systems in different countries afloat. Now, in the Bahamas, that is not as big a deal as it first appears, right? Because we have our dominant banks of three foreign banks, three Canadian-owned foreign banks. And second, we don't have an awful lot of capital markets issue. So we have banks that will issue loans or originate loans and then hold the loans until they mature. So that type of a system is harder for you to break down, right, if there is a problem with capital. Now, the positive side, that's an issue. But on the lending side, that's not as big an issue, okay? So the Basel III framework recommended narrowing the Tier 1 capital definition to include, I'm just going to fix this so you all can see it, to include retained earnings and common stock and higher capital requirements to offset bank exposure due to derivative positions. So let's just talk about the Tier 1. When you look at the capital requirements for a regulated company, right, you basically have the capital defined as what can be qualified, what will qualify as capital to the regulators, and they will give a different value to Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 capital, okay? So if even though you may have government registered stock as your capital, your investment in government registered stock as your capital, right? That may only qualify for what? A Tier 2 or Tier 3, right? Level of capital. So these definitions have come into play from Basel I and Basel II. So in Basel III, they have narrowed the Tier 1 capital definition to include retained earnings and common stock, right? So now you're talking about your funds, you as the bank. Retained earnings comes from your income. So if you're making money, your profits are flowing into retained earnings on your balance sheet, okay? So now your retained earnings are considered part of capital, okay? Then the common stock, right, that you have is also going to be considered as capital, okay? So that's a much narrow definition. The next thing they did was they said we need higher capital requirements to offset bank exposure due to derivative positions. Now, earlier in this course, we said, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks earlier, we said that derivatives are primarily off-balance sheet transactions. Yeah. So what this requirement for Basel III says is that if you have a lot of derivatives, if your bank has invested in a lot of derivatives, take out the lot. If your bank invests in derivatives and take a position in those derivatives, you must have a higher level of capital than a bank that does not invest in derivatives or take a position in derivatives. So in terms of the Bahamas, we don't have derivative positions, so no problem. Yeah. Now, think of a smaller bank in the United States. Okay, so a bank like Sun Bank, right? The Sun Banks in Florida is much smaller than, say, Wells Fargo or Bank of America. If they are not investing in derivatives and Bank of America is, then Bank of America has to have more capital set aside per the Federal Reserve requirement than Sun Bank. Okay, that is a huge change. Okay, a huge change, because now, right, the bank has to think about whether or not it's worth it to invest, right, beyond a certain threshold position, okay, in derivatives, which will lead to them having to increase their capital. Okay. Now, why is that all important? Capital is the money that the bank has, and it is scarce. They don't want to use that. They want to use your money. They want to use my money. Okay. They don't want to use their capital. Okay. But they have to use their capital every time they make a loan. Okay. Because they have to cover a certain amount of that in terms of reserve requirements, and they have to cover a certain amount of that in terms of the risk that they take. Yeah. So since capital is very expensive, since capital is scarce, since banks don't want to use capital, how is the best way for the regulatory authorities to, in a sense, push the banks in the directions that they want to go? Just make sure that they meet their capital requirements, okay? Because it means they're not going to make any money off of that capital to the extent that they would have made if they made an investment in derivatives or loans or whatever investment they would have made, okay? Now, I know this may sound a little bit involved and complicated and so forth like that. No, it isn't, okay? It isn't, all right? All this boils down to is, if your bank is considered to be more risky than my bank, you have to put up more of your own money, your capital. That's it, okay? The more capital you put up, right, the greater the risk you're taking, right, the greater the chance that you will lose your capital, which you do not wish to do. All right, so that's the Basel III framework. We'll continue with that, right? These last two, right? Banks boost their capital during favorable economic conditions to create a larger cushion for lean times. This is one of the ones the banks were very, very much against. All right, so I'll ask you, Carla, why would the banks be very much against this? Boosting their capital during favorable economic conditions to create a larger cushion for lean times. What do you say, Carla?
Let me think about it.
All right, Ms. Cartwright. Why would
Yes.
you think the banks would be against this particular recommendation from Basel III?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Okay, you'll do it again, right? Why do you think commercial banks were trying to have this particular Basel III recommendation that banks boost their capital during favorable economic conditions to create a larger cushion for lean times. Why would commercial banks be against that? Why do you think they would not want to do this?
I think, well, for us, I could talk for Commonwealth Bank. I think they would not want to boost their capital because at that time during economic conditions, a lot of persons cannot pay their loans and a lot of persons can't afford to pay their loans either because loss of jobs or the funds that's coming within the household. So the bank would be at a risk if they boost their capital
Okay.
to assist during these times.
Okay, you understand what we're talking about, but it says banks boost their capital during favorable economic conditions as
Is it
opposed to lean times.
I think I
So
have an
you're on the
answer.
right. Go ahead.
Is it because during favorable times they want to do other things with their money instead of boosting the capital?
Absolutely. What other things would they want to do?
I guess invest.
Angelique, when the bank making a lot of money, do they give you a raise?
No,
When the bank
Yeah,
making a lot of
sometimes.
money, when the bank making a lot of money, do they give you a big bonus?
no,
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Y'all bank don't give y'all?
You may get a bonus, but you won't necessarily get a raise because a raise will go on and on and on, right? A bonus, you'll get maybe that one off. Okay, you're onto something there. So for all of y'all, the reason banks would be against this is because during favorable times when they're making money, what do they want to do with that money that they retain? They want to pay it out in dividends to their shareholders. Yeah. So they pay the money out to shareholders. It's coming out of retained earnings, right? That's where your dividends come out of. So they paid dividends during those times. Great. They made an extra couple of $1 million or an extra $300 million. They pay out 250 of that and keep 50 in capital, right? What this is saying is instead of paying out 250 out of that 300,000, maybe you only pay out 100,000 or 150 and keep 150 in capital for when things get a little rough. Yeah. Banks are really against that because myself as a shareholder, I want my dividends. And if you're making money, why shouldn't I get some of that money? The management getting theirs because the chairman and all of the chief executive officer and all the senior managers, they getting their bonuses, right? Some of the staff getting their bonuses. So why can't I get something as an investor? Okay. So this was very contentious, this particular thing, right? And the reason is simple. If you pay out dividends, the dividends come from retained earnings. And that is where your income flows into. And it's easier to pay dividends or big dividends, right, when you're doing well than as opposed to when you're not doing so well. Okay. The last one, use of stress tests to determine how a bank's performance capital levels would be affected by changes in economic conditions. Now, this is a big deal. Okay, this is a big deal. Now, I want you to just picture this. The Central Bank of the Bahamas says to all of its licensees engaged in commercial banking in the Bahamas that every 2 years, you must do a stress test of your entire loan portfolio. Not just the stuff that you send me once a week, once a month, once every 3 months, once every 6 months. No. This is something that has to be done. And here is how you are going to do it, or here are the guidelines for it. And after you've given me that stress test, okay, if they come out to where the stress test results are such that you should have to increase your capital, we will give you 1 year or 18 months to increase your capital. So you can see where this is really contentious, right? Most banks in the Bahamas that are sending information into the central bank, right, can find it difficult, right? And their central bank is adamant about you making those reports on time. They're adamant that you follow up on their questions or information on those reports, right? And they're just a little bit more aggressive than they used to be 20 years ago. I wouldn't even say a little bit, a lot more, okay? And so they will fine you, right? And when you get a fine for not meeting the central bank requirements, and you are Scotia, Royal, or First Caribbean, that shows up at your head office. And that means that your internal auditors from head office have that information when they come down to do your audits. And now, right, you better have some really good reasons, because when them guys are finished with you, you may not have a job, okay? So this last point here is important, okay? The question becomes, how does a stress test work? In principle, it works like this, okay? What if interest rates in the Bahamas were increased by 5% base rate? In other words, the prime rate went from 4.25 to 9.25. What would happen to the bank's performance based on its loan portfolio that it's holding today, okay? And whether or not it would lead to increases or decreases, in other words, the effect it would have on capital levels in the bank, okay? To do that, right, I have done them by hand with an offshore bank, and it's not too bad. But if you're willing to do this for Commonwealth or Scotia or First Caribbean, you got to do that by a computer. Every loan, not one group, not one individual, every loan. That means you have thousands of loans that you're going to be looking at, okay? So this also means that if you put this in place, then you're going to need more staff, right? And more computers. And what that means is your expenses are going to go up. And these are compliance expenses. They're not expenses that can make money for you. They are compliance expenses, compliance with the central bank, okay? So the banks were not for this. However, it's in place. And in Canada, the United States, and in Europe, this is standard now, okay? I don't know if the Bahamas does it yet. I would have to ask you all if you have ever seen a stress test been done in the Bahamas, but I don't think they're being done here, okay? So let me just go back. All right, so the question I would ask you is, do you appreciate what the Basel III frameworks have done or are looking to do, right, when they're implemented, okay? Yeah. Now, these frameworks, right now in the Bahamas, we're on the Basel II framework, okay? And Basel III framework is the next step in terms of the standard, okay? And the chances are, and I almost could guarantee you, we're gonna have to get to that level, right? Probably within the next 3 to 5 years. I would think within the next 3 years. Okay, any questions or any clarification or anything you're not sure about Basel III? Martine, I haven't heard anything from you. Are you still there?
Yeah, right here.
Okay. So, what's a stress test? What if we changed interest rates, or what would happen to our portfolio if interest rates went up? Another stress test question that comes up quite frequently right, would be what would happen to the bank's loan portfolio if the value of real estate dropped by 20%. So, Ms. Cartwright and Carla, Ms. Kemp,
Yes, yes,
right? Did the value of real estate in the Bahamas during the Great Recession effects, did the value of real estate drop?
yes,
Absolutely, right? 20% in Nassau and almost by 50% in some parts of the Family Islands.
yeah.
On top of that, the hurricanes and so forth, okay? So if that happened, what could possibly happen to Commonwealth Bank's loan portfolio and Scotiabank's loan portfolio?
If the interest rates go up,
No. If the real estate, if the mortgage, the value of the underlying security, which is the real estate, was to drop by 20%.
That means that the properties that they're holding, it's in holding its value, so therefore, if persons can't pay their mortgages or there's no equity in it, the bank, if the bank goes to sell those properties that they would have repossessed, they can't get the market value that they have, that they feel that that's invested in it from their end.
Absolutely. So if the value of the property drops by 20%, right, that implies that you will not be able to get your principal back, right? You may get a portion, but you will not get all of your principal back. This is from the bank's point of view. So if the bank loaned $1,000 against collateral of $800, and the value of that $800 goes down to $600, yeah, the bank now got to find a way to make up the rest of that. If there is a loss as a result of that drop in the value of the collateral, right, because the homeowner can't pay, not because of the value drop, but because they can't pay, the bank is going to take a loss. What does a loss do? A loss reduces your net income, right? So you have less money going into retained earnings. So you have less money going into build up your capital. Yeah? Okay. And the Central Bank of the Bahamas, like all central banks, monitor the capital levels in a bank, right? And if it goes below a certain percentage or threshold compared to its assets, the value of its loans, okay, it has to change. It has to bring the level up, right? And they're given a very short window to do so. It's not 5 years, right? It's usually something like 6 months, because all you have to do is stop making so many loans. Yeah? And the banks don't want to do that. So the stress testing mechanism, although it's new, not new, it was at the time when it came out was relatively new. But the stress testing mechanism is now standard operating procedures in most international or multinational banks. So Royal Bank has it, Scotiabank has it, First Caribbean has it. They may not be doing it per se in the Bahamas, but I assure you it's being done in their head offices. Okay? So that's two ways a stress test can be conducted. What if there is a change in interest rate? What effect will it have on the bank's loan portfolio? What if there's a change in the value of the underlying security, right, in a bank's portfolio? What will happen? What would the effects be? Okay? And people think, well, the value of the land ain't gonna go down. You've seen it yourself. Okay? You may not have the money to buy it, but because of the level of delinquencies in the Bahamas over the last 10 years, it is amazing how much the value of land has gone down. Okay? Now, unfortunately, most of us can't take advantage of it because we ain't got the money if we're still working. But that's the way it is. All right. Any questions again? Nobody? Okay. So we'll continue on with bank regulations. Okay. The first, now what we've talked about is the mechanisms that the central bank has signed up for and the imposition of those standards by the central bank on its licensees in the Bahamas. Okay. And those things that it signed up for was Basel I, Basel II, and Basel III. Okay. Now we want to go and say, well, how do they know what is going on in a bank? Okay. Yeah. So we start with the single most common point of failure in a bank: poor management. Now, I always ask this question: how many of you all believe, right, that poor management is the single most common cause of bank failure? Who believes
Me.
that?
Me,
That's Colette. Who
Carla,
else?
Carla.
Two. Anybody else? So that the others do not believe that management is the cause of failure, the most common cause of failure. Miss Cartwright, Shawnette,
I agree.
Dominic, Miss Whitfield, Martine,
Yes.
you agree with that first statement there?
Yes, I agree. That's with every business.
You're absolutely correct. Remember, first and foremost, it is management's responsibility to put in place all of the policies, procedures, staff, and whatever else to make the bank run. Okay? And it is their responsibility to monitor those systems and procedures and so forth to ensure that they're being adhered to and to change them when they are not doing the job they've been designed for. Okay? When you're not getting it to work. Yeah? So, if that is the case, poor management will cause your bank to fail more than anything else. Okay? What was the reason that the Bank of the Bahamas, what was the primary reasons that you can think of that the Bank of the Bahamas had its difficulties?
Poor
You all
management.
agree? Yeah, but
Familiarity.
you gotta be a little bit more specific.
Familiar.
Not, yeah, Carla, sorry. Yes, familiarity of what, Colette?
They couldn't separate the line of business and personal and friend.
Okay, so they did things to the detriment of the bank to help their friends.
And they gave a plenty leg loans.
What's a leg loan?
Yes, mommy.
What's a leg loan, Colette?
Explain that, Carla.
Carla,
what's a leg loan?
I really can't say what that is.
Okay, I come to you.
I will ask Martine. Tell Martine, fish me in.
I'm coming to Mr. Fountain for a loan, right?
Right.
I'm making $10,000, but I want a $40,000 car. You know I can't afford it, but I come in there, I'm making promises to you. Whatever inappropriate or whatever, and you fall for that, you can get me that loan. Those are the most of those loans fall off the books.
Okay, so that's a leg loan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know who they're giving it to.
Okay. Anybody else? So familiarity leading to leg loans. Any other reasons? Miss Ferguson, Shawnette, I need an answer. Give me something. Come on, we all know that the Bank of the Bahamas almost failed. It had to be bailed out by the government. You represent the money that was used by the government of the Bahamas to bail out the Bank of the Bahamas because you are a taxpayer.
I going to say,
Your
we bailed them out.
your taxes went to them as well as my taxes. So why were they having so many problems? What do you think? We think it's management, but specifically, what do you think management did or didn't do that allowed that to happen or resulted in this thing happening?
They get, like they say, they gave loans to their
Okay.
friends who
Okay, Carl.
they
Okay,
end
Colette.
up writing, huh?
Colette, that's fine. I
Yes.
got you. That's one. There's other reasons. What do the other members of this class think? Martine, Angelique, Shawnette, Miss Whitfield. I'm sorry, say that again, please.
They could have been.
They could have been, hello?
Stealing, thieving.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Fair enough. Yeah, that's always a possibility. Somebody else. So familiar leg loans, Stephen, right? Somebody else, come on.
Falsifying
know-
documents.
Okay, so they might have been engaged in some sort of fraudulent activity, right? Okay, that's fine.
Mistreated.
Somebody else.
Staff. And then the staff leaving.
Sorry, mistreating staff and the staff leaving. That's
Good.
possible, but I don't think that has really been a cause unless a lot of staff are leaving. But
I said,
we'll throw that in there. Somebody else. Let me put this to you guys another way. How much money did the bank receive from the government of the Bahamas? Anybody have any idea? It was in the newspaper. You can see it on the Bank of the Bahamas balance sheet on BISX or go to their own website. It's on the accounts of the Bahamas government. It's just over $300 million. I think that's what it was. $300 million of taxpayers' money. Anybody got anything to say about that? Do you think the Bank of the Bahamas, do you think the government would bail out Royal Fidelity or Commonwealth Bank if they ran into the some sort of problems? Anybody? Carla?
No.
You smiling?
If I think Bank of the Bahamas would bail them out,
No, if the government would bail out Commonwealth Bank or Royal Fidelity.
I think they would, yes.
No, they
Anybody
wouldn't.
else?
No.
Why not? Why do you think yes and why do you think no? You
I
first,
think no
Angelique.
because
I think yes, because.
Hold on, Carla. Let Angelique go. She just
Okay.
started first. That's all.
Okay.
Go ahead, Angelique.
because they are not government owned like Bank of the Bahamas.
True. Absolutely. Big difference.
Yeah, the government don't have a stake inside any of the other banks.
Okay.
Yeah, but the government,
Well,
but
actually,
central,
they do.
but
They
central
do, but
bank,
it's not a controlling interest.
right, and
Anyway, go
central
ahead.
bank, and central bank can loan them monies to help them out.
True, but why would the central bank lend money to a bank that's failing because of poor management?
Because it is a financial institution.
That's true, but at some point they have to say, no, we're going to take over the bank and you all got to carry your backsides.
But
They can do
could,
that.
yeah.
The central bank has the authority, has the right under legislation to take over the management of any bank in this country. That's a licensee, that is. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make here is this. Okay? Management is responsible for everything. Okay? And the difficulties that the Bank of the Bahamas faced were very straightforward, but difficult to manage because most problems are not complicated. It's you trying to manage the problem or to resolve the problem that's complicated. Yeah. The difficulty that they faced was, right, as a result of the Great Recession, a lot of their loans consumer as well as corporate, started to go bad, right? And the mechanisms inside the bank to monitor and control those loans, right, were inadequate. That's management's failure. On top of that, because it was affecting the whole economy, not just the customers of the Bank of the Bahamas, because Scotiabank, First Caribbean, Royal Bank were experiencing the same thing. But the Bank of the Bahamas capital levels were much lower, and also they could not get capital from a parent company like the Canadian banks. So what does that mean? Their capital is eroding because of the number of bad loans they have. The number of bad loans they have are much higher than other banks because of poor management, monitoring, and controlling. The erosion of the capital leads to them having losses. They have losses. The central bank says you're not meeting your capital requirements. You have to do something about this. Okay? That's the process. Now, that's easy to say. To do something about it, a bank owned by the government in a country with 300,000 people, right? Okay. And it's making continuous losses over some 3 to 5 years. Woo, that's a big fix. Okay. You've got all the things to consider. The depositor's money, if the bank goes under, right? The staff that are working in the bank, okay? All the loans that won't get repaid. Yeah. The computer equipment or the failures that you had because the computer equipment wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, or you weren't monitoring it properly through the computer equipment. So you have to change management. You have to clean up the bad debt. You have to get an injection of capital, and you have to hope that things in the economy turn around. Every bank in the Bahamas experienced that. Every commercial bank in the Bahamas experienced that to some extent during the Great Recession from 2009 and even now. Okay? Scotiabank wrote off a lot of loans as well as sold a lot of loans. So they took a loss, they took a considerable loss, right? And then they recapitalized it from head office. Royal, in particular, Finco, went through the same thing. CIBC, First Caribbean, went through the same thing. Okay? Okay. So, right? How regulators monitor banks. Since management is the most common cause of bank failures, regulators always look at management. Okay? Okay? But because there is no reliable measurement of poor management, okay, it is difficult to grade managers. Now, before you start saying we can't check on the managers or see how good they are, remember, if you wish to establish a bank in the Bahamas, you must meet all the licensing requirements of the Central Bank of the Bahamas. Okay? One of the first things that they check for is what they call who are the directors, and are these directors fit, right, and suitable persons to be a director of this bank. Then they apply the same criteria to who? Senior management in the bank. So if we were looking at the Bank of the Bahamas, that means that every director would have to be vetted by the central bank before they could become a director. Yeah? The same applies to every other bank. Mm-hmm. What would the central bank be looking for? Do they have the education? Do they have the experience? Do they have the background knowledge? Have they done it before? Okay. So here are some of the people who are on the board of directors of Bank of the Bahamas. Okay. Kirk Antony, he's an attorney out of Freeport. Okay. Guy named Tim Brown, who's an accountant.
This Bank of the Bahamas?
Yeah, you don't have to write this down. You could find all of this online. I'm just trying to show you that these are people who are directors and they had to be vetted by the central bank before they can become directors. And it's the same for Commonwealth Bank. It's the same for Royal Fidelity. It's the same thing for Scotia Bank Bahamas and for Royal Bank Bahamas. Okay, every bank. Okay, in Commonwealth Bank, right? One of your directors is Mr. Raymond Winder, who is the president of the bank. He's a former accountant with somewhat 40 years of experience in accounting. Okay.
Yes.
Another director of the bank, the chairman, is Mr. Sands. And Mr. Sands is the former managing director of Commonwealth Bank. Another director of Commonwealth Bank is Mr. Larry Gibson, who is the managing director of a pension fund in the Bahamas, Colonial Pension Fund. You understand? So these are all people that are considered to be fit and proper to be directors. The management of the Bank of the Bahamas, right? The managing director is Ken Brathwaite, a career banker. Started out in Scotia, went to Commonwealth, from Commonwealth to Bank of the Bahamas. Very, very good banker. Okay. Another member of the management team there is Neil Strawn, right? Also a very good banker from Commonwealth Bank. Okay. There's another person there named Jihan Williams. She is the chief financial officer. She is an accountant and worked for years with Deloitte and Price Waterhouse. She didn't work for Deloitte and Touche. She works for Price Waterhouse. Okay, so all I'm showing you is that these are all people who are acceptable to the central bank to have those senior positions in the bank. Academic qualifications, of course, or professional qualifications, experience, knowledge, and so forth. There are people that have been put in who have become senior management in Bank of the Bahamas, and the central bank has not accepted them. Okay, they have not been accepted by the central bank.
Why
they
not?
have the right, because why is irrelevant for this conversation. The central bank has the right under the laws of the Bahamas to say, no, we will not accept this person as a senior member of management. They can't just do it willy-nilly. They have to justify that it can be done. And it has been done in the past. Okay? So what is it?
So, Mr. Fountain, if someone wants to be promoted from a manager to a senior manager, they have to be vetted by central bank, is what you're saying?
If they are going to be a senior manager in a bank, they have to be vetted by the central bank. But if you're going to be promoted from head of operations, right, or head of the operations unit to the chief operating officer, okay, in Commonwealth Bank, it implies just by the title that you're getting into senior management, you probably got a good 20 years of experience, minimum. What do you think, Carla? Okay, your chief operating officer is Denise Turnquist, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, Denise was in CIBC when I was with Barclays. And when we became, just before we became First Caribbean, and maybe about a year or two before, she left and went to Commonwealth Bank. Right? So the point I'm making is these are people with a lot of experience and should know what they're doing. Okay. So that's how one way that the regulator can deal with management, okay, in a bank. But remember now, this is at the beginning when the bank is putting in new directors or new management or forming up for the first time. Yeah. Once they're in there, Unless they're grossly incompetent or thief something, the central bank just can't go in there and say, you gotta go. Okay? All right? Now, so that's one way that the central bank can have an influence on the management. However, because that can be rather subjective, right? Bank regulators fall back on 6 basic characteristics, right? When they look to regulate a bank. Now, this is a general thing. This is not necessarily exactly how the Federal Reserve or the Central Bank of the Bahamas or the Bank of Canada or the Bank of England regulate banks. But these 6 categories, right, that comprise the CAMELS rating system, right, will be embedded in the methodology that these central banks use to monitor their commercial banks. Okay? So it is a good fundamental place for you to look at and say, okay, if a regulator is going to look at Commonwealth Bank, we know it's going to embed at least these 6 things. Maybe more, but it ain't gonna be less. Okay? Yeah? So we talk about it because we use the acronym CAMELS. Okay? And the acronym for CAMELS is, okay, capital adequacy, asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity. Okay? Capital adequacy. Simply put, does the financial institution have sufficient capital, right, to support its activities? Asset quality. Assets to a bank are loans. What is the quality of the loans that this bank is making? Right? Management. Is the management fit and proper? Is the management doing its job? Okay. Earnings. Is the bank profitable or is it losing money? Is its earnings steady or is it volatile, up, down, cross, next, right, whatever? Liquidity. Does the bank have sufficient liquidity to meet the demands of its customers? Sensitivity. Okay. How sensitive is the bank's loan portfolio or its deposit portfolio, right, to external market forces? So we're mostly referring to here the stress testing that we talked about earlier. Okay. A stress test is a form of sensitivity analysis to external market forces. Okay. Now this is in your text. Okay, I make this up. So anything that you miss or you didn't hear me talk about, you can read it in your text. And I guarantee you, you will be tested on some of this. So I guarantee you that it would be a good idea to study CAMELS. Okay? Capital adequacy, asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity. Okay. Any questions about this so far? No? Martine? What is that? Look like a piece of paper. Miss Whitfield? Shawnette?
No questions.
Great. Excellent. So if I ask you, what's the liquidity mean in CAMELS? Could you tell me? Give me a quick answer to that, Ms. Whitfield.
What's the question? What's the liquidity?
What do we mean when we talk about liquidity in this ratings? Just a quick answer, nothing long. What are we talking
How
about?
much cash a bank has, I guess.
No. What does liquidity mean to you? How quickly something can be converted into cash? How liquid is the bank? Right? Does it have sufficient liquidity to meet its requirements? Yeah. So you might say, well, they have a lot of cash, but remember, if they're holding a lot of cash, it means they're not making any money on that cash because it's not being used in a loan, right? So they're not investing it anywhere where they can make a return. So banks don't want to hold a lot of cash, okay? And they only hold cash because they have to. What do they use cash for in a bank, Miss Whitfield? What is cash used for in a bank? Miss Whitfield, you there? All right. Anybody? What do you use cash for in a bank?
Provide loans.
Operations,
Operations, sure.
investments,
Not cash. I'm talking about the actual paper money.
oh, to give out deposits, loans, pay bills,
Pay bills. Yeah. All right.
maintenance,
But the big one is to give the money to the depositors when they need it or when they want it, right? What would happen if Commonwealth Bank told people to come back for their money? I walk in there on Monday and they tell me come back on Tuesday to get the money. What do you think would happen?
you ain't gonna leave because you're gonna want your money now.
They fighting, being down.
Okay, but what if I make a ruckus and other people hear this? Then they take a picture of me and they hear what I say and then send it on WhatsApp. You think other people can come in there to get their money?
Everybody can close out and go to another bank.
There is that possibility, right? There is that possibility. I was working for Barclays Bank in Freeport and Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, had a branch in Freeport, and they closed down because they had a run on the bank. People had heard something and they went in there to try and get their money out. I had customers coming in with checks drawn on the bank on BCCI, for 50,000, 150,000, 300,000, right? And they wanted me to cash that check right away. The answer was no. Okay. They were trying to get their money out. Okay. That means that they had to have sufficient cash to be able to do that, to make everybody feel calm again. That is part and parcel of liquidity, having sufficient cash on hand to meet the requirements of the bank. Okay, so each of the CAMEL's characteristics is rated on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 indicating outstanding and 5 is very poor. Okay? A composite rating is determined as the average rating of the 6 characteristics. Banks with a composite rating of 4 or higher are considered to be problem banks. Right? Now, chapter 18, pages 475, 478. See if you can find it in your books, please, in your text. And this is the section about how regulators monitor banks, and it gives you the CAMEL's ratings. Okay? And then it gives you an explanation of each individual category, with examples, okay, when they can. So let's take capital adequacy.
Which page do I find it on?
Chapter 18, bank regulations. Just look for
514.
camels.
514, thank you. 514.
That's the 12th edition, I think.
Yeah, different part.
Okay, everybody got it? So it says, because this is under capital adequacy, because adequate bank capital is thought to reduce a bank's risk, regulators determine the capital ratio. This is a fundamental ratio in bank monitoring and control by the regulators. It is a fundamental ratio when a credit officer is looking at lending to a corporation. Okay? It is a fundamental ratio when a credit officer is looking at lending to an individual. We might call it something else in each case, but it is, right, straightforward, okay? Typically defined as capital divided by assets. The amount of capital, how much you have put in, right, or what proportion of your assets are financed by capital, okay? Yeah. Now, when you read through this section, bear in mind, right, that first sentence, yeah? The adequate bank capital is thought to reduce a bank's risk. Regulators therefore determine that the capital ratio is important. Now, Colette, you've done reports to the central bank. Do you see anything in these reports that relate to capital ratio or something similar that tells the central bank what Commonwealth Bank's capital ratio is?
Our reports are most, the reports what I would have done would have been from, what the thing name? Account side in reference to accounts opening and stuff like that.
Okay, that's fair enough, no problem. But somebody in Commonwealth Bank has to be providing them with that information, right?
That's our head office and our, what the department name
Chief
is?
financial, the
Yeah.
chief financial officer.
Yeah.
Who's the chief financial officer? Who's responsible for all the financial operations in the bank?
Well, that
Usually-
falls under, operations, VP of operations,
And who is that?
Juliet Fraser.
Okay, yeah, okay. So, all right, now, the next part that you need to look at, okay, is asset quality, the next one, okay? Each bank makes its own decisions as to how depositors' funds should be allocated. And these decisions determine its level of credit default risk. Regulators therefore evaluate the quality of the bank's assets, including its loans and its securities. Now remember earlier when we were looking at bank operations, we looked at the balance sheet for Hornet Bank. Remember that? And we took that balance sheet and we said a certain proportion is in consumer loans, mortgage loans, certain is in cash, some is in equity, and so forth. Yeah? Okay. So now what the bank regulator does, it says, right, you are responsible for making your own loans, bank management. We want to see the quality of the loans that you're making. Therefore, we are going to look at each loan or a sample of the loans, and we are going to consider them against the 5 C's of credit. Yeah? Everybody got it? Just looking for something here. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go back. Okay, so we just talked a little bit more about capital adequacy. Now we're talking about asset quality. Okay, so when we look at the quality of the asset, we want to know about the 5 C's: capacity, collateral, condition, capital, character. Mhm. That's what a lending officer is going to base their analysis on or around. It may be expressed a different way, but they're all looking at these sort of things. Each thing: capacity, the borrower's ability to repay; the quality of the asset, collateral, the quality of the assets that back the loan. Remember when we were talking about stress tests, right? I lend a customer $100,000 to buy a piece of property. The property is worth $120,000, right? And 3 years later, the property is now worth $80,000. I am under collateralized. Okay, if I was to try and sell the property, I would not get my money back. Okay, principle that is. So the quality of the assets that back the loan. Condition, the circumstances that led to the need for funds. My friend Colette pointed out, right, that the man who come in with one and asked for one of them leg loans wanted to buy a $40,000 car when all he could afford was a $10,000, what do they call them thing, cube, or an $8,000 cube. Or maybe since he went to Japan direct, before with Japan, maybe only a $6,000 cube. Yeah. What the circumstances that led to the need for funds. Capital, the difference between the value of the borrower's assets and its liabilities. Sound familiar, Carla?
Can you repeat capital again, please?
The difference between the value of the borrower's assets and its liabilities. In other words, how much spare or surplus money do you have? If your liabilities are greater than your capital, you got a problem, or your assets, that is, right? You have a problem. If your assets are much greater than your liability, you're laughing all the way to the bank. Okay? Character, the borrower's willingness to repay loans as measured by its payment history on the loan and credit report. Now, in the Bahamas, since we are just now getting a credit bureau, that will become more accurate, that description. But at the moment, character in the Bahamas is done through getting an assessment of the history of the borrower, right? Especially if they borrowed money from your institution before, right? So what happens if I borrowed $20,000 for a car from Commonwealth Bank and I default on that loan, or I become a bad payer and they finally get the money? Commonwealth Bank, when I go back in there, says, hold on a second, let me just check. I know this man. Nope, he's a bad character. He has a bad character based on his payment history. We don't want to lend him any money before again. Okay, that's how we can look at the asset quality. Yeah. All right. Okay. Management. Each of the characteristics examined relates to the bank's management. In addition, regulators specifically rate the bank's management according to administrative skills, ability to comply with existing regulations, and ability to cope with the changing environment. They also assess the bank's internal control systems, which may indicate how easily the bank management could detect its own financial problems. Okay? That's management in a nutshell. And that is that bit where they talk about changes, right? Ability to cope with the changing environment. That is a major problem for most of the banks in the Bahamas today. the local banks feel it a little more than the Canadian banks, because the Canadian banks have greater human resources. They can get someone from Canada or from one of the other islands to come in and manage their bank here. Okay. Unfortunately, right, that could be a problem for the local banks: Commonwealth, Bank of the Bahamas, Royal Fidelity. Okay. It's not that we don't have good management, it's just that good management talent is scarce, and you may think you have the quality that you need, but it ain't nothing gonna test management like changes. And in the Bahamas right now, the banks are having to face up to some very, very severe changes. What's the biggest one? People ain't working. That means they can't make payments on their loans. That means the bank isn't making loans. Yeah. Not just to get, so management job is not just to get people to borrow more money, but they also have to make sure, right, that they have early detection systems to see if anyone is having problems and to do something about it before it becomes a problem. Earnings. Although CAMEL ratings are mostly concerned with risk, earnings are very important. Banks fail when their earnings become consistently negative. In other words, they're making a loss. A profitability ratio commonly used to evaluate banks is return on assets. Okay? Again, these are things that are going to be sent into the central bank. That ratio is standard, and the Central Bank of the Bahamas is going to receive that in some way, shape, or form on a monthly or quarterly basis from every bank. Okay? But make sure you understand what this means, right? We are not talking about risks. We are talking about the impact earnings have on the creation of capital. Okay? If your bank is profitable, net income flows to retained earnings on your balance sheet. That is the formation of capital. If your bank is making losses, what happens? You do not have the same amount of income going into capital. What really happens is you have no income going into capital, and you are reducing your capital to cover the loss. Okay? So it's always better for a bank to be making something as opposed to a loss. Okay? Because they will run into problems because it erodes, losses erode capital. Liquidity. Some banks commonly obtain funds from some outside sources, such as the Federal Reserve or the Fed funds market. But regulators would prefer that banks not consistently rely on these sources. Such banks are more likely to experience a liquidity crisis, whereby they are forced to borrow excessive amounts of funds from outside sources. In other words, regulators always prefer for the banks to have a big enough deposit base, right, that it can meet the funding for its loans from that deposit base. We know from the previous lectures that banks can borrow from the central bank, they can borrow from other banks. In other words, they can get money onto their books that will hold up their deposit levels, right, such that they are not compromising their loans. But the regulator is concerned that if they do that often and frequently, there may be something fundamentally wrong, right, because they should be able to do it from the level of deposits. I'm going to say this one other way, okay? Remember, a bank is in the middle. And if the bank is in the middle between the surplus units and the deficit units, between the depositors and the borrowers, right? it has to make sure it has sufficient money with which to lend. Okay? And the cheapest source of funds is always going to be your depositor's money. Okay? If you have to borrow it from somewhere else consistently, it's going to cost you more. Okay? Good bank management will ensure that they have sufficient deposits with which to lend without having to run short and quickly borrow from another bank or from the central bank. That's what we're talking about when we say liquidity. It also encompasses that you have sufficient cash, right, on hand to meet the bank's internal demand for cash, to meet the bank's demand for cash to satisfy depositors, to pay bills, to pay rent, to pay the staff, whatever it is. Okay? Sensitivity. Excuse me. Okay? Regulators also assess the degree to which a bank might be exposed to adverse financial market conditions. Two banks could be rated similarly in terms of recent earnings, liquidity, and other characteristics, yet one of them may be much more sensitive than the other to financial market conditions. Okay? Now, let me give you an example of that in the Bahamas. Okay? Commonwealth Bank, where some of y'all work, is known as being a lender to consumers or small people, right? 7,000, 20,000 loans and so forth, unsecured loans in particular, okay? Scotiabank is not known as a lender, is known as a lender to consumers, but it does not give very many unsecured loans, okay? Which one of those are going to be, which bank, Commonwealth or Scotia, is going to be more susceptible to changes, right, in interest rates? Okay? At first you will say both, but it'll really be Commonwealth because their loans are unsecured, and if not all of their loans, but some of their loans. And so if interest rates went up, the chances are the customer will not be able to pay for it, right? Pay the increased amount, and the bank will have no collateral to fall back on. Scotiabank, right, with more of their loans being collateralized, will be able to weather that storm a little better than Commonwealth Bank. Okay? Now, we are talking about sensitivity here. Okay? So, how the bank creates the composition, how the bank creates the composition or mix of its loans is up to management. Okay? You can't lend all of your money in mortgages. Neither can you lend it all in credit cards. Neither can you lend it all in consumer banking or consumer loans. There has to be some kind of a mix that allows you as the management, right, to satisfy the demands of the market as well as keeping you balanced, right, in dealing with the overall portfolio of the bank, the loan portfolio of the bank. Okay? Yeah. So sensitivity testing and the results, even if you don't give it to the central bank, right, helps management to deal with that mixture. Okay? I will go back to the example of Hornet Bank that's in your textbook. If Hornet Bank has a balance sheet where 90% of their depositors' money is in 3-year consumer, unsecured consumer loans, Would that be prudent? The answer is absolutely not. You're going to take 90% of your lendable funds and invest it in consumer loans that are unsecured, no collateral, and have a maturity of, say, 3 years. You'll be broke in a minute. Okay? If you did that and you had sensitivity testing or stress testing being conducted, right, in the bank, that would come to light very quickly. It should come to light in the reports that you send to the central bank. So you should not be in the position where you could say, ignorance is bliss, I don't know. You should know that. Each senior management of the bank knows exactly what proportion of its loanable funds are in which types of loans. That's a daily report almost. Okay? So there you have camels. Any questions about camels? Sorry, any questions about camels? Anything that you're not sure about? Anybody? Marty, and that's an awfully dark screen. Looks like you're here.
Thank you.
I can't. You could see me, but I can't see you. Okay. Okay. So, anything about camels? Miss Russell? Colette? Shawnette?
I think I get it.
Miss Fernanda?
I'm good.
Miss Whitfield?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. We went over this, right? We talked about the ratings. Okay. Now, as I said to you before, camels is not exactly what the central bank uses, right? The central bank uses a much more involved, right? Much more broad and robust, right, system of monitoring its banks. But embedded within that system will be all the things that we talked about in camels. Okay? Right? Now, what makes camels really good is that it is essentially a screening device, right? It identifies banks that have a potential to have difficulties or potentially problem banks. That means that the regulators can turn around and say, oh, Bank of the Bahamas is showing signs of potential issues. We need to hot-foot it over there and check them out. Or pull all of their reports, right, for the past 2 months, and let's go over those results. And let's see if we can identify, right, more specifically, the issues the bank is having where Camel is showing, right, that they are potentially problem bank, right? So it acts like a screen, like a sieve, right? All the ones that fall through are okay. Anyone that don't fall through, you want to know what's happening with that bank, okay? There's also a subjective opinion based on the regulator's experience in assessing a bank's financial health. Now that is an issue in the Bahamas, because at one point we had a lot of regulators or bank inspectors, right, with a fair amount of experience outside of the Bahamas, okay, outside of the Bahamas. And so what that did was those regulators, right, having seen other banks in other countries, had a much broader view of the issues that the banks may face and, right, how they were handling it. Okay. One of the big issues over the years in the central bank is the quality of the inspectors. Okay. And I don't mean in terms of experience, in terms of them working outside of the country. And if I remember correctly, bank inspectors employed by the central bank are actually independent contractors. They're not staff, they're contractual employees, which is different. Okay. And finally, these problem banks, once they have come up, once they've sieved them and come up with the potential problem banks, once the inspectors have had their say as to what they think is causing it, and if they have some sort of a consensus of opinion that this bank got problems, then they can be targeted for further examinations and remediation by the central bank. Now, I'll give you the example. I'll give you the example with Bank of the Bahamas. Some people think that Bank of the Bahamas just happened to have had difficulties overnight or over the course of 1 year or something. No, the central bank, right, as is normal, sends in inspectors to every commercial bank in the Bahamas every 2 years. So those reports, once they're completed, come into the Bank Supervision Department of the central bank. They are reviewed, right? And a findings or a what they call basically a report, right, is then issued by the central bank, right, with those issues that are priority being highlighted, and it's given to the directors and the senior management of the bank. So in Bank of the Bahamas, right, prior to the government giving them any money to bail them out, they had 2, maybe even 3 inspections by bank inspectors, central bank inspectors. They produced their reports, and those reports were submitted to the board of directors. Okay. Now, what happened to them? I don't know. Okay. But obviously, since the bank had to be bailed out, and these reports had taken place prior to the bailout, then it makes you wonder, what would management doing? Okay. Remember, the directors direct management, right? And they focus their attention on what is considered to be issues. Okay. So, central bank was doing its job. Okay. Unfortunately, circumstances worked such that Bank of the Bahamas, as it had more issues because of the recession than some of the other banks. So, a summary of bank regulations, right? And basically, it's just logically follows. Banks are dealing with OPM, other people's money. Banks are in the middle between the deficit unit, right, and the surplus unit. We say they're in the middle between those two because there is a financial market which banks participate in, right, where those deficit units are putting money into the bank, right, and the surplus units are putting money into the bank, and the deficit units can get access to it through the loan systems of the bank. Okay? Therefore, they are regulated. So banks must meet the regulatory standards imposed by the regulatory authorities, whether it's the central bank or XYZ, it don't matter. Okay? On deposits, loans, capital, and the services provided. Okay? Capital requirements, right, are to ensure there is sufficient capital to cushion against any losses, okay, And the Basel Accords focus on more stringent risk-adjusted capital requirements and increased capital. All right? We talked about the Basel I, Basel II, and the Basel III Accords, right? And they are focused on capital primarily, okay? The CAMELS is a screening tool to identify problems. CAMELS is an acronym for capital adequacy, okay? Asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity. Any questions? Anybody has any smart remarks? Anybody have any dumb questions that are still interesting to answer? Anybody has anything else they want to say? Anybody falling asleep? Okay. Dominique, you falling asleep?
No,
Great.
I'm okay. Wide
glad,
awake.
I'm glad I'm not boring you guys to death. All right, and that's it. Okay.
I have to write a whole letter.
Okay. Ms. Russell, it's nice to see you today. How's the peel going? I remember that from last week. Ms. Russell?
Sorry, I don't know why I thought my camera was on. I'm sorry. It was good. It's finished now.
Oh, excellent. So you're back to normal. Excellent. Okay. So I can ask again, any questions about bank regulations? Remember, we're going to have a test next Tuesday and then the following Tuesday, right? And you'll have your projects to complete, okay? The test we're doing tonight is on bonds. The next test will be the next section after bonds, I think, just to be sure. I think, right, we did. We haven't done much. We've done equity markets. Yeah. So you're going to be looking at chapter 16. No, that's derivatives. We're not doing that. So commercial banks. All right. So we're going to have a test on commercial banks. And I think before that, it was just stocks. Okay. All right. So that's where we are. Your test is coming. Since I finished this lecture a little early, I don't want to start another one. I'm going to send you all your tests. All right. And we can maybe finish a little earlier.
Oh, thank
Right.
you, Jesus.
I'm not sending it early for you, Miss Ferguson, because you just said that. We're going to hold back on that. I noticed that you cheered up the minute I said that. The light came on. I can now see you. It's not a dark room. But the more you make me talk, the less time you will have to do the test. So hold on, please. Okay, I have sent you all the tests.
You can.
All right, you should be getting it in your emails. Anybody know if they canceled Junkanoo for 2021? Christmas 20, Boxing Day, Christmas 2021? Please confirm when you get the email with the test. In the meantime, anybody took their vaccine shot?
Nope. I got the test.
Thank you, Dominique.
I got
Soon
the
as,
I got the test also.
okay. Soon as you get
I
it, you
got
can.
'em.
Soon as you get it, you can start. Since
I-
I'm in a good mood, you can still finish at 8:25. That gives you almost 40 minutes to do this test, which is an easy one.
I got it
Yup.
too.
Great. Thank you, Angelique. What's happening, Shawnette? Ms. Whitfield, did y'all get the test?
Yes, I got it.
Great. Shawnette, what's happening? Did you get the test?
No, I'm getting it right now.
Colette got it.
Great. Knock yourself out. It's 7:50. Get your test back in by 8:30. That gives you an extra 10 minutes. Enjoy. Good luck.
Mr. Fontaine. Mr. Fontaine,
Yes, Martine, I can hear you.
can you confirm if you got mine, please?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing that in 1 minute. I had a phone call that I took, so I'm trying to do that right now for all of you guys.
Me as well, please.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let me just go to my emails. That's simpler. What's wrong with my emails? Let me refresh them. Okay, so I have Miss Cartwright's. So I have Claudette. I have Shawnette's.
You should have mine too.
Just give me a second. I promise you I'll check all of them. Give me a minute. I
Okay.
have Martine Ferguson's. Okay. And I'm
You,
gonna
but you
cover-
could check to see if something attached to it, please.
Yes, I can see something attached to it, and it looks like it's yours.
Good.
get
I sent that myself tonight. I didn't need no help.
That's excellent. Excellent. Okay, so let me just respond to you. Okay, so that's you. And Ms. Cartwright, I got hers. So good night, Martine.
Good night, Mr. Fontaine. Good night, class.
Okay. Angelique, I did get yours.
Okay, good night.
And then,
Good night.
I sent mine, Mr. Fountain. This is Dominique.
Okay. I'll come back to all of you and confirm. I'm just trying to do that now. Okay, Shawnette, I have received yours. Shawnette, I've received yours. So
okay,
if you,
thank you.
that's fine. Okay,
Good night.
good night. And okay, Dominique, I received yours as well, and I've sent you an email. Okay, Carla, I've received yours, and I've sent you a return email.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right. Okay, Ms. Whitfield, I received yours as well.
Good night.
Now, where is Ms. Russell?
You got it?
I don't see yours as yet, Ms. Russell.
Can you send it again?
Hold on, just let me check.
Okay.
Sometimes you see when you all send it, it comes as part of someone as a response to my email. So, and then
Oh.
some people send it as a separate email, and those are the easier ones to find.
Mhm.
Let's call them. Okay. All right, let me just refresh. Give me a second. I don't see yours. Hold on, there is.
Again, right now.
Wait, let me just check because it's Angelique, Colette. All right, Shawnette. Cola. Who's Cola?
That's me.
I'm supposed to know that that's you.
I put my name in.
There's-
I put my name in the subject.
Okay, I got it, and you'll get it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.